Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andrew from B&H, and I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to our Podcasting 101 Creator Roundtable. This is the first in our Creator Roundtable series. These events, we're going to be hosting some more of them, and they're going to explore various topics related to photo.
Welcome to our new podcasting.
Audio, and we're going to do that through bringing together a panel of expert creators, and where you can hear from them and help you kickstart your creative journey. This is also the first live stream that we've done from the Tech Corner here at the B&H Superstore that features a live audience. So I want to take a moment to welcome all of our live audience here. And I also want to, we got some, we were just talking before the stream, we got some creators in here who are very curious and interested in hearing from our panel. And I also want to take a moment to welcome our live stream participants. If you can't be here in New York City, it's so great that you could join us via the live stream. Please go ahead and drop in the chat where you're watching from. Today you can expect us to cover some topics about how to start a podcast, and we'll talk a little bit about equipment, we'll talk a little bit about editing, and then also how to distribute your podcast. And we are going to be running a couple of different raffles. We're going to run an online raffle for the live stream participants where there'll be 5 gift cards given away that range in value from $50 to $250. And we're also going to be doing an in-store raffle here for in-store participants where there'll be some prizes that have been given to us by Rode. And also there's going to be a Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, which is a very popular camera for content creation and podcasting. So that's pretty exciting. So make sure you stick around to the end. We're also going to have a short meet and greet afterwards where you'll be able to meet Luria and Tom. And unfortunately, Bandrew was not able to make it today. I'm going to introduce our panelists in a minute. He fell victim to the CrowdStrike outage. But we'll have a short meet and greet here with some refreshments. So please stick around for those of you that are in the store. Also, I know I'm talking a lot, but I'll be out of your way in just a minute. We have some promo codes that went out to all registered participants. They're exclusive promo codes, unique promo codes that are able to be used. They're valid for today and tomorrow. We have some great podcasting deals on our website, and you can take advantage of those. If you're in store, and you registered, you will have gotten an email for that, but we'll also have some printed copies here. And if you are joining us online and you have not registered yet, if you register before the end of the event, we'll be able to send you those promo codes too that you can take advantage of. So we also want to thank our audience for submitting questions during the registration process. We will be covering those topics, some interesting questions that have been curated by some of our team here from the responses that we received, and they have to do with monetization and branding and also growing your audience, and we'll cover those towards the end of the time today. And just to remind you that education doesn't end here at B&H. It doesn't end with an event like this. We have experts on staff here available in store, over the phones, and via chat, and you can reach out to them. And if you have any questions about how to accomplish your content creation goals, they're more than happy to help you. That's part of what we do here and what makes B&H a special place. So I would like to thank our creators for joining us today, for braving the airports on this challenging weekend. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys for introductions. So Luria.
Hi, I'm Luria Petrucci. First of all, I have to give mad props to the B&H and Rode teams for helping us deal with this CrowdStrike issue and getting us here as much as we could. So I've been creating videos and podcasts for 18 years in the Podcast Hall of Fame, and now I help entrepreneurs create better videos by choosing the right video gear and software, helping them show up more confidently on camera, and getting over yourself so that you can show up boldly and create authentically.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. We were really excited to hear from you. I think I need a little bit more of that getting over myself.
It's all of our problems. Come on.
Well, Tom.
I'm Tom Buck. I have a YouTube channel where I basically share my lifelong enthusiasm for audio-video production. And prior to that, I was a high school digital media teacher for 11 years. and definitely like to get over myself and out of my own way. And also, proud B&H customer since the year 2000.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's great that we have a couple of people in our live audience here who are teachers and are working with students. So it's great to have that perspective, and I'm sure you'll be able to fill us in with some of that too.
I can do my very best.
And we have joining us from an undisclosed secret location, Bandrew Scott.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You weren't able to make it in person, but thank you so much. And thanks, mad props to our team here too for figuring out how to do this over Zoom. So, Bandrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me again. I'm sorry I can't be there. I really wish I could, but all the flying saucers are out of commission. I have been making YouTube videos since 2005. My current channel I launched in 2015. And I focus mainly on audio gear and how to use it, how to get the best sound. And I've been podcasting since 2013, with the current podcast running for just about 10 years since 2014, 2015. So happy to be here, happy to talk podcasting. Hopefully we can get you going and get you some good information.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really enjoy watching the content from our panelists here. So thank you guys for producing great content. And I think also just being dedicated to helping people upping their game is really important, which is what we're all about today. So we're gonna jump right in here, and I guess the first, with technology becoming so available and so accessible, and the barrier of entry getting lower and lower for people to be able to create media themselves, the allure of creating a podcast, or it can seem like such a great idea, but how important is it to, or what are some things steps that people can take to be able to, I guess, provide longevity to their podcast? Like how important is it to find a why for your podcast, and how crucial is that to developing a target audience? So I'll just open that up if anyone wants to jump in.
I'll jump in. Okay.
No, you go. You go first. Okay. I would say, like, how crucial is it to have oxygen? It's like you really need it. I think if you have the spark of like, it'd be kind of cool to start a podcast, maybe I want to, I think then jumping in and doing it regardless is the way to go, and you kind of build the track as the train goes down it. But knowing what you're doing is huge, and a way to do that, there's a statistic which might be slightly out of date, but it was most podcasts fail after 7 episodes. People get to 7 episodes and they're like, it's too much, or they lose their passion, or they lose the reason they were doing it. And I think if you can find an idea that helps you, that has longevity, that is sustainable, it's like, you might think, I want to do somebody's holding a big blanket outside. I'm going to do a blanket making podcast. Sweet. And after episode 3, you're like, that's everything I know about blankets. So finding a thing that you can keep coming back to, week after week or episode after episode for a long period of time, which might not be your first idea. So kind of like literally getting out your notebook, writing down ideas that here's everything I want to do, breaking that down into like episode ideas, seeing, am I struggling to come up with more than 3 or 4? Or like, can I just fill up this whole notebook with potential ideas? Or if it's a topic, something like, it's pop culture, where it's new movies are going to come out every week or multiple times, and you kind of have this indefinite thing. Finding an idea that you're passionate about and is sustainable, and then like the overlap of that Venn diagram is a sweet place to be.
That's awesome.
It's also really important to know where you're going. Like, you're not going to know exactly where you're going. That's going to ebb and flow and change. But understanding what it is you're doing this for. Is it community? Is it just to have a passion project? Is it to make a business out of it? What is that reason why, and where are you going with that long term, so that you hold on to that a little bit more? What does it mean to you? Why are you doing this? Like, a lot of people do create content, in my experience, just because everybody is. And so you need more than that to be able to sustain yourself through more than 7 episodes. And then really knowing what it is you're trying to actually accomplish through that.
And if I could add on to that, I think finding something that you're truly passionate about is incredibly important. And the way that I address that is would I be okay making this podcast or this video if nobody was watching or listening? That will carry you through the tough times because it can be difficult to grow podcasts. So if you are doing something and covering something that you love, that is going to give you the motivation when you may not have astronomical numbers.
Yeah. And also, one other thing is it's really important at the beginning stages to know that value comes in many forms. I think that's one of the things that many beginners starting out struggle with the most, where, like, who's going to listen to me? What am I, valuable for, essentially? Value comes in many forms: education, humor, being able to help people laugh in a day, like, that's hugely valuable. So many, many different forms of value. And what is that you can provide to people? And knowing that, since we're talking about getting out of your own way, knowing that you are valuable, knowing that you do have something to offer the world, and it's the right people in that world, that's, if you can hold on to that, that really helps tie all of these things together.
So that these things definitely seem like ways to be able to sustain your podcast. Tom, I really liked what you said about finding even getting a notebook and kind of writing out things for ideas for episodes. What are some other ways that people can sort of, I guess, come up with an episode structure?
Oh, episode structure.
or would that be like if you've compiled those ideas, like how would you turn that then into sort of like an episode structure?
Well, I went first last time. I don't know if I should go.
I can chime in here. In terms of structure, I think it's there are a couple of things that I like to look at this from. One, knowing how you operate best. Are you a freeformer, which I think you are, right? More so.
Oh yeah, I'm jazz improv all the way.
So, like, are you a freeformer? Do you like to be scripted? Do you like to kind of have an outline and bullet points? And knowing that up front of how you personally operate is going to be the key to finding a structure that's going to work and be sustainable and that you're actually going to enjoy. And then from there, you've got to understand, then, do you go solo? Do you have a co-host? Do you have guests? And those are the beginning stages of your structure decision.
So it seems, just to pick up on a couple of points that you've made, like just the part of the common thread that I'm hearing through what you're saying is like really kind of taking an opportunity to sort of learn yourself to be able to effectively communicate to other people.
Otherwise, you're just trying to follow suit and do what everybody else does.
Yeah, and I wasn't being rude and checking my MySpace. I was bringing up an example that I have. One thing that I found, so I helped people do podcasts for a long time. I had students do podcasts, and what I found for me was that I was like, I'm going to start my podcast. And it just kind of kept going. And after a while, I was like, oh my God, does it end? Or is this, I just do this every week till I die? Or like what? And I decided to I think I'm going to end this season after 21 episodes was what it was. And so that was several years ago. And so I was like, oh, cool, a season. And I can take a couple weeks off or however long and come back and do another season. And eventually I got it down to 21 episodes is 21 weeks. That's a long time. 10 episodes is way more sustainable. So I started doing 10 episode seasons. And the thing I was looking up was I have a notes app on a notes doc on the notes app on my phone. And I kind of started breaking my season down, like 10 episodes. Like the first one is a season premiere. So there's always news to catch up on. There's sometimes there's listeners' emails and messages and stuff. I always liked episode number 5 to be a Q&A. And then I knew I started doing episode 7 or 8 would be what I called a help desk. So I did creator-driven stuff, audio-video-driven stuff. And so the help desk was someone could, not just a Q&A, but it's literally I got the Rodecaster and I got, this microphone. How do I do that? And diving in and literally you push this button, click this thing, do that thing. And so, and then the other episodes, there's nothing by these numbers because it's I don't know, Canon comes out with a new camera and maybe I want to talk about that, or maybe I have some crazy thing that I'm excited about or whatever. So it's leaving room for freeform, but having a structure so that every time I went to go make an episode, it wasn't what's this week? What can I do now? So I pulled away from the mic. And
That's all right.
I've never used a microphone before, so it's a little tricky to me. And so that was really helpful. So not just having an episode structure, which I think, like Luria was saying, depends on everybody. Like, I'm sure Bandrew can talk to that because his episodes are so well structured. But even just taking your episodes and how they fit together in a group or a season or a series or whatever is really important.
Great.
If I could chime in on episode structure, I think it's really important to understand who you're making the podcast for. Are you speaking to an expert? Are you making a podcast about heart surgery so you can just dive into the meat and potatoes of the information? Or are you trying to address a more casual audience? That will determine if you need to be more structured with definitions, if you need to go more in depth with your explanations. And also, I think it's important to think, how is a new listener going to experience this episode if they jump in here? If somebody is a new listener at episode 50, do you start the show with 5 minutes of rambling and inside jokes? That may not be something you want to do, or maybe it's it's exactly what you want to do. But thinking of each episode as, if a new listener jumped in here, how would their experience be? What would they experience? Would it make sense, or would it be confusing?
So it seems like there's a large part of this of kind of, I guess, being like a podcast producer in a way, that you have to assume that role. There's definitely some pre-production that comes into play. What about, though, if you feel like I'm not equipped to take on that role? Have any of you had experience with a separate podcast producer, or is that something that you would recommend to people?
I know you have something to say on that.
The thing that a lot of what we've been talking about is like my personal podcast. But a lot of people that I know have to do podcasts for their jobs, and whether it was something intentional or now it's like, guess what? You make podcasts, and you're like, that's not what I got hired for. That can be a really important role because it's just like today, we have this whole stream set up. We got to show up, we planned and like, hey, these are some of the topics, but we didn't script it out. We just got to show up and do this. And other people kind of had to put all the parts together for us. And that was great. And it took a lot of stress off of us to be here today. But it also, in theory, if that were a streamlined thing where you didn't have people traveling in when like the world collapses technologically, then it's something where we could do a lot. Because you have a team that's just doing that. They're not worried about performing, and because it is a thing. You have to be behind a microphone. That's a type of performance, and sometimes you're not feeling it. And it's like, you can't, I don't know, be in traffic having road rage, and then on the mic, like, what's up? It's the, like, Happy Kids podcast. And you're like...
Well, if you live in New York, you kind of...
Exactly. So I think if... It's what the workflow that works for you. Some people, like, I love doing everything myself because I'm a crazy control freak. And so I love being like, I'm going to come up with the ideas, make the thing, record the thing, produce the thing whenever I want. But that doesn't work for everybody.
Right,
so.
right.
You're going to screw it up at first.
Just like
that. So you're going to, it's useful to actually do some of the work yourself so that you understand it, just the same with editing. But you're gonna screw up format, you're gonna screw up the production side of things in the first many episodes that you do, and you have to be willing to allow for that failure. Getting somebody to help you is absolutely valuable. However, it may not be your first step, right? Because you can do enough or understand enough just to get it out so that you play with format, so that you play with all of these different concepts, and then find somebody to do it for you. And it's like the music industry. Not that I know anything about it, but my understanding is that a musician, a singer, gets together with a producer, and that producer helps create the magic, right? Helps pull the things out of that person. And so I think that creates such a beautiful dynamic, but also costs. So you got to be ready for that.
Exactly. Right. Bandrew, you got anything to add?
Yeah. Don't be scared to allow your audience to produce the show a little bit. Tom was alluding to my podcast being very structured. That stems from feedback from the audience. So I allow the audience to kind of produce how my show turns out. A lot of times I pull comments directly from them, and that will dictate what I discuss on the following episode. So that allows you don't end up having to pay anybody. Your audience gets to participate. You are giving the audience more of what they want. So in a way, they are functioning as the producer, and that can be a way to avoid that additional cost and also improve the quality of the content by giving them exactly what they want.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, because I was actually going to reference your notes doc, Tom, where you were saying that you had the episode structured in different ways, and it seemed like you do the same thing, allow the audience to kind of, in some ways, produce the show.
Yeah, it depends on your show, of course, but if you have an audience that is, if everyone's talking about this thing or asking this question and you're like, forget that. We're talking about this that nobody's interested in. Like, why not lean into what the people who give you their time to listen to your show actually want to hear about?
Right. Oh, that's great. And it also seems like, I guess we're going to have to move on in a second, but that seems to also help keep your podcast essence alive. Is that would you say that? Like, had the audience involvement, like, and taking people's, I guess, opinions into account.
Not every opinion,
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, making people feel like it's part of it, right? It's your show, but it's a two-way street. And we've all watched a sports team maybe that wins, and that win feels like your win. You weren't doing the thing, like you did nothing. You drank a beer and like ate some nachos, but it's your win, like. And that's kind of a thing you can build with your audience. We're in this together. They can be more active than just drinking beer and eating nachos too. And then if your show does well or continues to grow, it's like the audience is a vital part of that, and they helped it happen.
Awesome. Well, let's transition over to talking about equipment. Hopefully that's given you guys, especially watching online and in the audience, given you some tips on how to put together your podcast and maybe restructure some things. But when it comes to equipment, obviously there can be significant investment, but maybe there doesn't need to be initially. So how do you suggest, or do you have any recommendations for just the idea of people selecting the right interface for them, the right mixer or the right microphone, or however someone wants to proceed? You don't necessarily have to go out and spend a whole bunch of money to do it, but what would be some ways that people can navigate that?
Well, before you let Tom kill your entire budget, some people were saying earlier that they're in debt because of you.
My last name is Buck.
I just want to start this conversation on, we can get into all of the gear and dive deep, but first, there's so much gear out there. Back when I started, back in the day, there was a drastic difference between audio gear and the more in it, or the less expensive stuff was really not good. But these days, when you agree with me, guys, it's all going to be good,
right?
So it doesn't have to cost you a fortune. You can start out small, understand what capabilities you need first and foremost, so that you're not buying all of these things that you're never going to use, or that's going to overwhelm you. Or what I see is people stop creating or procrastinate creating with the excuse that I've got to figure the tech out. The tech is a tool, and it should be useful for getting you the job done. And there's a lot of cool tech out there, don't get us wrong. And B&H is full of it. I'm geeking out here. But it is really vital to understand, what are your capabilities, what are you trying to accomplish, and what is the right tool for you.
Yeah. Bandrew, it looks like you changed microphones.
Yeah, I changed microphones to prove Luria's point. I am on a $20 microphone right now.
Nice.
So really I don't think there's any excuse, except in extreme situations, not to sound good. Because you could get a $20 microphone, a $10 cable, a $40 interface, and get really great sounding audio. You just need to understand the gear that you have and understand how to use it properly. Have good microphone technique. Don't use it a foot away in a completely untreated room. Make sure your levels are set properly so you're not distorting. Then you're off to the races, and you are well under $100 if you're doing more of a solo podcast. Once you start adding multiple mics and multiple inputs, it gets a little bit more expensive, but it can still be extremely affordable to get fantastic audio that just wasn't possible at this price 20 years ago.
All right, go ahead and spend their money.
All right, so here's what you need to buy. I like gear. Like that's if you go watch my YouTube channel, it's like I did a video a couple days ago. Like here's the Zoom H1 Essential. It's awesome, and I literally say because it's affordable, you should buy this. Because I kind of think a lot of people should, if they do think. Anyway, gear's really fun. That's where my like talking about gear comes from. But a thing I also try to say a lot whenever I make anything is I think it's important to start with what you have. And then upgrade as your specific needs become apparent. Like Bandrew there, if you look at Luria and our channels and stuff and what B&H is doing here, these are all totally different use cases, totally different needs. So, if we just copy and pasted each other's setups, it might not work that well and we might actually be really frustrated. So when you start with the basics and then you realize like, okay, I'm gonna get a USB microphone. You can get a good one for 30, 40 bucks. Cool. And that can be all you need. And then you realize, well, I'm gonna have a co-host. How do I do 2 USB microphones? There's some ways to do it. Maybe I need a mixer. Maybe I need something that has 2 microphone inputs. Like your needs will grow and kind of dictate what your show should become and what your equipment will be. And then you can become like me and get obsessive and just like, no, I have 48 microphones for one mouth. But
And then the most important question after that, I think Bandrew and Tom would agree with me, is do you like sound effects, and what kind of sound effects do you need for a mixer? That was a joke. Never mind, it didn't.
All the sound effects.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's just air horns all day. Right. Yeah. But I think a big point too, and something is like, especially we're doing this like it's a live stream, so anyone who's watching or listening to this, whatever you're watching or listening to this on, that can make a podcast. Yeah. It probably has a camera. It probably has a microphone. It's got a screen and an internet connection. That's all you need. And then it might not be like, honestly, it still probably sound pretty darn good. Like you run it through some processing online for free and then it's going to sound like amazing. You upload it to a free distribution service, you're done. You can make a podcast today.
Right. Wow. Well, actually, that kind of brings me to the next point that we were going to discuss, which is adding video. Luria told me that when you first started podcasting, that video was actually part of it, and who knew? Like, because it turned to just straight audio, an audio format, and then now it's kind of come back to around 360 degrees to adding video again. So if people are looking to do that, and I know obviously like in terms of content today, like how important video content is. What are some recommendations for migrating your podcast from an audio-only format to a video-based format?
Well, I would say the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II that some people are going to maybe win. So, the camera itself, you can, again, like we're talking about mics, you can start with your MacBook camera or whatever camera you got. You can start with your phone. Of course, I like to have people set up for, basically I want you to set up for live streaming, because from there, everything works backwards. So you can do podcasts, you can do video, you can do short form content, you can do everything. But you can't start with video and then add live very easily because some of those components don't match up. So start with like a setup that is going to be really good for everything you could possibly want to add later. So that way you're not spending budget on things that you're going to have to redo later. But yeah, like a camera like the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II is fantastic. But again, you can start with anything you got.
Right. Okay.
Bandrew,
you got anything?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the additional work that video adds and just be aware of that going in. Audio comes across super easy once you start producing video. I would say it doubles or triples the amount of time it takes to produce a full episode, assuming you aren't just doing live to tape and then publishing it. And when it comes to cameras, I am 100% on board with what Luria said. I'll even switch cameras. This is the inbuilt camera, and it's kind of ruining the thing because I have center stage. But one thing to focus on, I'm looking at the wrong camera, is framing. So just make sure you have yourself centered in frame as opposed to have the camera pointed at the ceiling and you're just in the bottom of it. So even with a kind of bad looking camera, as long as the audio sounds good, I think you can get away with a inbuilt webcam. So you don't need to spend a lot of money, and then you can determine if you're getting enough value out of adding that additional work to invest in a higher quality camera.
Bandrew, I have to say that was the best demo ever.
Yeah.
Well, it was because he's literally trying to make it look bad and can't.
Well, I think that's the thing. Good audio does cover a multitude of sins.
Yeah.
Which is an underrated premise, I think. But
And along with the workflow and the workload that he's talking about, it also, you have to think about that from a content strategy perspective. So what's your primary distribution? Is it audio or is it video? Because if you're doing both, when you're on camera, you naturally say, look at this, see this, right? And so you start to kind of visualize it in a lazy way. So if audio is really important to you, you must think about those lazy effects, and describe what it is that the people who are watching on video are seeing.
that's a really good point. If someone was migrating their podcast, say, and they're in this process of going from an audio format to a video format, do you have any tips for how they could take existing episodes that don't have video and either, to, I guess, move them over to that format? Would there be using stock footage, or what do you think, Tom?
Ironically, I have an audio-only podcast episode about how to do this.
Why is it audio only?
There's this new website. It's called YouTube, and it's great.
We should hear more about that.
Yeah, I tell you, I guess, all about this website.
Never heard of it.
YouTube started supporting podcasts. People have been uploading podcasts to YouTube forever, but it officially started supporting podcasts relatively recently. And so one thing you can do is you can actually import your RSS feed, which when you make a podcast, you upload it to a host, and it gives you this feed, this link, and that's what goes out to all the directories. So it's Apple, Spotify, whatever. I think Google just shut theirs down, so I forget. I think it's just YouTube now. They moved it over. That's kind of how that works. You can now put that RSS feed, so like I use Buzzsprout, for example, as my podcasting host. I can take my Buzzsprout link, put it in YouTube. YouTube will suck all my episodes from Buzzsprout, upload them to YouTube, and even though they're audio only from years ago, it will just use my podcast album artwork as the visual, and then it will do the, it'll just be the audio playing.
Waveform thing?
You can, no, it won't even do a waveform, it's just
Okay.
artwork, that's it. But you could do custom artwork if you wanted, or you could change it. But if you have like hundreds of episodes and you're like, I don't want to make hundreds of videos right now, you can literally just import everything right now and it'll work and it'll get the job done. The benefit there being that now your podcast, even though it doesn't really have a video format, it can take advantage of YouTube's search algorithm, recommendations, playlists, all of that, which is huge. And so I think that's something I've done with several audio only podcasts, and something I think anyone should do, just because now you have a whole new directory and it's the biggest, most powerful one.
Right. That's great.
I've seen some people use like a looping AI video that they just put on their audio
Okay.
so that there's some visual aspect to it. I don't know how effective that is, though.
Can I add on to what Tom was suggesting?
No.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on then.
No, go ahead.
If you are uploading your podcast to YouTube with a static image and you have an existing channel, I would recommend making a separate channel for that podcast, because static image videos that are long form, 30, 50 minutes, don't typically do the greatest, and that may impact the performance of your other videos on your channel. So if you're going that route, yes, it is the easiest, but if you have other content that you want to succeed on that channel, it may actually harm it. So having a separate channel for that would be my recommendation, or creating some kind of video. It is a lot more work, but a great example of this was the Watchfinder podcast. They didn't have video of the hosts, but they would have different microphones for each host. They would switch to while each individual was talking. When they were discussing watches, they would pull up press photos. So it adds something visual for people on YouTube to engage with. And what are people looking for on YouTube? Video. So if they just get a static image, it's much less likely to actually engage them, much more likely for them to click off. And that doesn't just harm that video, it may potentially impact all the other videos on your channel.
That's a great point. We're actually going to come back to talking a little more about distribution lately, but those are some great points in terms of like how to incorporate your existing audio-only podcasts into a video format. But just to back up onto the whole camera discussion, I love the idea of being able to, we have such powerful devices in our hands to be able to create content with. But if someone wanted to, move up to a dedicated camera setup, what would be some things to look for to help them choose the right camera for their needs?
When you're thinking about the camera, obviously something, but maybe not obviously, but my recommendation is something that's set and done. Like if you use your phone, you're going to be pulling that in and out of production, and that's going to stop you. You're going to find a reason to excuse away doing this podcast because you have to put it in and you have to set it up again, right? So looking for something that is desk mounted or tripod mounted or otherwise is the ideal way to go. But again, it kind of boils down to, well, here's what I would say. When it comes to video for podcasts, you don't need very fancy camera gear. Come on, bring. This is an amazing camera.
But
like you don't like this is a particular purpose, right? And so you don't need something that is going to just be sitting in studio for all of the functions that this provides.
I want
Thank
that.
you so much.
Cool, yeah.
I want that too. But thinking about something that's just simple and has simple features for this particular purpose is the way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about like why you would want to upgrade to a camera. Like if you're just looking for clear video, you don't need to because your phone will do it or just any webcam will do it, like clear video. What people probably want when they're looking at a real camera is they want something that stands out and looks really different. So that's usually some element of background blur. I'm looking at Bandrew over here a little bit. Like he is very crisp and clear. His background's a little bit out of focus, but you can still kind of tell what's there. That looks very different than what a phone can do. You can also play with lighting a lot more because more dedicated cameras, even ones with the smallest sensors, are still typically a lot better in lower light, and so that gives you a lot more flexibility and not having to be like the brightest, highest key thing. So you can start creating a lot more mood and tone and elements and stuff, and those are the kinds of things that then a dedicated camera will give you that your webcam or your built-in camera can't. And if those are things you want, then it's worth going down that path. And from there, you could just spend all the money on earth because there's so many options.
And you're gonna get that background blur from a professional camera, but the lens itself. Bandrew, which lens are you using?
I am using the Sigma 18 to 35, I believe. It's the YouTuber lens.
Yeah, and so right there, that lens that he's using is an 18 to 35 prime lens, so that means it has a very wide no, it's not a prime lens, 18 to 35 prime lens. That doesn't make sense. It's a zoom lens that essentially acts like a prime lens because it's f1.8 if I'm not mistaken, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
So he can use any focal length from really wide at 18, he can zoom in all the way to 35, but he can get f1.8, which means he doesn't need as much light and he's going to get background blur, and that's why it's the YouTube lens, because you can do that.
If none of that made any sense to you, the F number means the more background blur that you can get, essentially.
Right.
For those of you that aren't familiar, typically with zoom lenses, you don't have a constant aperture. The aperture is the f-stop. So there are more and more zoom lenses coming out on the market today that do have a constant aperture, but usually that was reserved for prime lenses, and that's what allows you to get that kind of blurry background or bokeh, which is the fancy word for it. I say bokeh. Right?
That is a rabbit hole you'll go down, because I remember buying my very first camera I ever bought was for B&H Photo, or my first DSLR was a Canon XT, which didn't do video or anything. But it came with the kit lens, and I remember the camera was like $800. I was broke. It took forever to save up for that. And when I got it, people were like, you should get this lens and that lens, and some lenses were like more than the camera or as much. I was like, that's insane. Like, why would I do that? Little did I know, that's kind of how lenses work. But when you get your camera, it's probably going to come with a basic lens. At least a lot of them do. Right. And that's going to be an instant step up from probably whatever you have. But it's also going to have limits, but you're going to hit your limits specifically, and you're going to know, I wish this lens went out wider. I wish it went in further. I wish it was better in low light. Like, it's those pain points are then going to tell you what you need next, and those needs will become apparent, and that's how you learn. It's not about like, I got to learn everything about cameras and lenses right now. It's like, let me get my camera. Okay, I think I want to get a lens. What's this YouTuber lens? Like, what is a prime lens? And you learn along the way.
I think one of the simplest ways you can figure out where your limits are is get a zoom lens and test all of the different, angles essentially, so that you know what works in your space, and then you can focus in on a better lens that will produce exactly the thing that you want.
Awesome. Well, we have a brand new podcasting display here in the store in our Pro Audio section. And we are now going to play a short video for you that you're going to hear from Lelena, who is one of our B&H experts, and you'll get a peek at this new podcasting display. And also, she's going to show you how to set some of these, how to set up something similar for yourself. So let's go and check that out.
Our new podcasting display in the Pro Audio department at the B&H Superstore. My name's Lelena, and I'll be showing you around. The first question you'll want to consider is how many people are going to be on your podcast. Each guest will need to have a microphone and headphones. Dynamic mics are great for isolating clean sound for speech while minimizing background noise. For single-person podcasts, USB microphones offer simplified setup while maintaining quality sound. These convenient mics eliminate the need for a recorder or interface and go straight to the computer. Each microphone needs to be secured in place, and we recommend adjustable boom arm microphone stands. Arm mounts such as these can be mounted to most tables or desks and increase mic placement flexibility. For dynamic microphones, the talon's mouth should be no more than 3 to 5 inches away from the microphone. Windscreens and pop filters help prevent unwanted spikes in audio, which are common with certain words. Here we're using Rode's Rodecaster Pro 2 as a mixer and a recorder. This device has 4 XLR inputs to record up to 4 participants, Bluetooth connectivity for music playback, and taking phone calls. Now let's set up the Rodecaster. First, on your mixer, make sure all the fader and gain controls are turned down. Once all the faders and gains are down, you can now plug in your mics and any other device into the mixer or recorder's input channels. Start with input 1 and go up from there with each additional microphone. Once all connections have been made, you can begin dialing in your levels. To do this, start with channel 1. Raise channel 1's fader to the unity position. This will be notated by either a picture of a U or a bold-looking dash next to the fader. Next, while speaking into the microphone, begin to raise gain control of that channel until your visual level meters peak between -6 to -12 dB, about 3/4 of the way up the meter. After the gain is set, the volume or level adjustments should be done with faders, not gain controls. Once you're happy with the level, move on to the next channel and repeat. Popular camera choices for podcasting include mirrorless cameras, cinema cameras, camcorders, and even webcams for ease of use. On our display, we have 2 Panasonic BGH1 cinema cameras, which feature professional cinematic quality, constant power supplies, and multiple outputs for switchers. Consider using 1 camera per guest, as well as an extra camera for wide shots. Basic video tripods work well for setting up your cameras wherever you need them. Alternatively, for tight spaces, mounting arms can be used for cameras, similar to the ones that we mounted on our microphones. Lighting is important, as you'll need to make your subjects look their best. A nice, soft light source, such as a monolight with a softbox, will give you a pleasant, natural look. For multiple guests, you'll want to consider a light source for each person. Experiment beforehand to find where the light looks best in your space. Light each guest from a 30 to 45 degree angle, slightly above their head. A capture card, such as the Magewell USB capture, will work to connect a single camera to your computer. For multiple cameras, a switcher is recommended. Switchers run through HDMI and SDI cabling, which you will need to correspond to the outputs on your choice of camera. A popular choice for multi-camera is the Blackmagic A10 Mini Pro ISO. It can input 4 camera signals and record to a single USB-C drive. Audio can also be fed into the switcher through the audio inputs. You'll want to run a line in and make sure the switcher is properly set for audio line in. Selection keys are pressed to select which camera you want to switch to for the next shot. Though some switchers can go live directly, we recommend connecting through computer software such as Telestream Wirecast, vMix, or OBS. These programs give tools to monitor both your video feed and your audio feed, as well as quickly add graphics to send to your stream to your audience. You'll also be able to easily sync your audio to your video if there are any delay issues. Recording can be performed, which could be used for backups or alternative setups. We're happy you joined us today. We're standing by to continue helping you improve your podcasting experience. Thank you for choosing B&H.
All right, let's give it up for Lelena for that, for those expert recommendations. Thank you so much. Just to remind you, too, that we have a whole team of experts, just like Lelena here in store in our B&H Superstore on 34th Street in Manhattan, as well as available via phone and via chat. And again, we're here to help you. We want you to accomplish your goals, even if it's not for a purchase. Come in and talk to us. Reach out to us via chat, over email, or via the phones. And since you're in the store today, and if you're not in the store, make sure you come in and go ahead and check out the podcasting display that's in our Pro Audio section. Teams worked really hard on that, and as you can see in the video, it looked great. So let's jump back into our topics for today, and we're going to move on to editing your podcast. We touched on this a little bit in some of the discussions that we've had, but if you're primarily working in an audio-only format, what are some considerations that you guys could see or have maybe encountered that could be helpful to people looking to edit their podcast?
I was gonna. Sorry. Go, sir.
Go ahead, Bandrew.
Okay, yeah. My first piece of advice for any kind of editing is respect your audience's time. So if your podcast is about politics and you and your friends go on a 10-minute tangent about popcorn, maybe consider editing that out. That's one big thing that a lot of people don't consider. They think, I'm laughing about it with my friends, this is great. But will the audience actually get any value out of that? Will it be humorous to them, or is it just an inside joke? The other thing is always, this is a very in the weeds kind of thing, but always remember fades and crossfades, because sometimes if you make a cut right when there isn't a zero, a null in the waveform, you will get this very annoying little pop and click in the audio. So just remember your fades and crossfades between the audio to avoid those annoying pops, please.
That was a great point.
That's a pet peeve, yeah. I think the thing, I totally lost my train of thought for a second.
You were thinking about pops and clicks.
I was thinking about pops and clicks, yeah. I honestly don't remember what I was going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom.
We could edit this out, right? It's not live.
We're going to respect our audience.
I'll come back to
it.
Can I take a squirrel moment?
Sure. Yeah.
To the point that Bandrew made about the popcorn, which is super spot on. There's also a balance of what I call audience triggers, which are inside jokes. But there's a mix that you have to kind of achieve of personality integration and human connection in between the content that you make. And I don't think that's not what you were saying, Bandrew, like to
Correct.
Remove all humanity. But I think that there's that balance. So respect your audience's time. I love how you said that. Also find ways to bring the personality into it so that there's authenticity. It's not just pure information, unless that's the value that you have promised.
Yeah.
Did you figure it out? Okay.
So I have a friend who also has a YouTube channel. His name's Raphael Ludwig. Maybe he's watching because he has a great camera channel. And his slogan, I had to remember it and I couldn't couldn't get it right. It is fix it in camera, finesse it in post. And I love that. I totally stole that from him right now, but I think that's the way to do it. Like, you're trying to get as much stuff right. Some people think, like, I want to put my phone in the middle of this conference room and have 8 people talk at once, and it's going to sound great. No, you can run that through as many AI filters as you want, and it's not going to sound good. So the more that you can, like Bandrew pointed out, like, it doesn't have to be the most expensive gear in the world, but the more that you know how to use your gear, set it up. The stuff that you're recording, the better that sounds when it goes in, you're going to have to do a lot less work. And I think the point that I was thinking of making was sustainability again. For me personally, when I was doing a personal podcast and having a full-time job and trying to do a YouTube channel, hardcore editing of a podcast like wouldn't have been sustainable. And so fortunately, being a teacher was like, hey, you can kind of talk for bits of time coherently mostly. And that was great. So that kind of helped me reduce editing, which meant I could do my show more versus like an NPR style podcast where you're putting layers on sound. You're like storytelling through sound effects and music and all these interwoven interviews and stuff and narrations. That's going to take so much more time, like hours per minute to edit. And both are great, but you have to figure out what's realistic for you. And if you have no time and you're crunched to make a podcast, and the fact that you're like, I don't have 5 hours to edit this 1 hour of podcast, well, it's better to find a way to not have to do as much so you can actually make more and get out of your own way.
It's becoming a theme. And there are techniques that you can learn when it comes to planning for the edit. So when you're recording your podcast, make sure that you're thinking about the edit. That takes practice and time, but the more you can intentionally know what's going to happen on the editing side, meaning you screw up and you want to restate what you said, because I've never messed up in my life, but I'm sure these guys have. I'm just joking. But you want to think about that so that you take a pause and allow for the editing process to happen without these weird, awkward, I don't know what that was, sound effects.
One of my favorite things, sorry, this is a slight tangent, but every once in a while I'll listen to a podcast and there's like a thing where the person will leave a note to themselves, like edit this out, but they forgot to edit it out. And that's like always a gold nugget to find.
So listen to your podcast.
So be careful if you are doing that. If you're leaving notes in for yourself, make sure you actually go back and do those things.
And please,
if I could add one last thought on this, as far as the preparing for your show to try to limit the amount of edits, I know a lot of people, they will only record when they're actually recording their podcast. A couple years ago, I wasn't happy with my skill on mic. So instead of just recording on mic for the podcast, I would record every single day. I didn't plan on publishing it, but I practiced every single day because that gives me 365 podcasts essentially to get better at it. And by doing that, that alleviated a lot of the time in editing because I got better at speaking on microphone, at performing, for lack of a better word. So do not be scared of actually practicing podcasting because it is a learned skill.
Wow,
perfect
that's
advice.
A great point.
One final thing. Make sure your mic is not muted. Just saying.
You just scared me, Luria. I was like, oh no, was I muted?
No, we got you. You were earlier though.
Yeah.
Not muted and actually recording.
Right.
And actually recording.
I was gonna say, for video, that can be a thing too. And that brings me to the next point, which about just video editing considerations. I mean, obviously we've kind of touched on how much time that can add to a podcast and how much time just video editing can take in general. But what are some editing considerations?
Well, I'll jump in, I guess. Or Bandrew, you go.
Yeah. I have one big consideration. Do you want jump cuts or do you not? Because if you just have one camera angle, that's fine. When you make an edit, it is obvious. But for my show, I use a camera that I'm looking in right now, and then I also have an overhead angle. And whenever I make an edit, I will switch cameras. So it just looks like I'm switching camera angles to give people a different view. And then that edit is hidden. So that's a really big consideration if you want to hide the fact that you are editing.
I do that same thing in my YouTube videos all the time with the second angle, and it goes back to Luria's point of if you want to do video in your podcast and you make it like essentially a pro live streaming setup, then it can do everything else, and that's a good example of that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Text-based editing, is that something that Bandrew and Tom, you found that can help to save time?
Can you describe what that means?
Yes. So I'm talking about where your NLE, your editing program, will transcribe the dialogue, and then you can read through that, so you can pick out which sections you want to edit. And there's also a way that I believe you can create cuts in the actual text edit page.
What I think is that's also a skill to learn. It can be a huge time saver because you basically just see your show and you're just being cut out. Some things can even then like generate your voice. So if you forgot something, you can add in a couple words and it will create it.
That's a
and I think
creepy.
A lot of people see those tools and they go like, perfect, like AI's got it for me. I don't have to do anything, which it can save a lot of time. But I also think like respecting your audience's time, or not even just the time, respecting your audience is important. It's like, yes, you can have an AI generate your show, write a script, edit it for you. Will someone really want to listen to that? Do they probably want to listen to a human perspective? And so I think it's sort of finding this balance. And my traditional thought would have been when it comes to that kind of stuff is like, be very careful with it. But I made friends with someone who had an immensely popular podcast that he edited only in Descript, which is a text-based like AI type editor. And it is phenomenal. But he also put a lot of time into learning how Descript works. He puts a lot of time into the edit, even though he's using a streamlining tool. And it doesn't feel like someone's taking a shortcut or taking the cheap way or wasting your time with what they're releasing. And that was like, it's kind of eye-opening for me because it sort of made me realize anytime you see a tool, there's a lot more to it than you might think and a lot more unique ways to use it than you might think. And there's like a million editing apps, so...
So one thing to add on there is if you're using text-based editors, I don't think that allows for video editing as well with multiple angles. So you may run into issues there, and you may just not be able to use it because if you edit down all the audio and your video is in the original length, that's going to cause 10x the work trying to match up where you made all these edits and cuts. So that's something else to consider. Are you adding video? That may make text-based editing obsolete. You're unable to use it. And just on the note of video, don't do the editing in your DAW, in your audio software. You need to process it, export it to your NLE, your video editor, and edit in there. Then export the audio and the video. Otherwise, you will run into just worlds of hurt trying to get everything to match up.
Sounds like you're speaking from experience.
Yeah, I had to figure that out back in 2015. How am I doing this? Like, I started on audio and I wanted to edit in my DAW. And then when I added video, I guess I have to export lossless from my DAW, drop that into Final Cut Pro, edit there, export the wave, export the video, and then process the audio down to MP3 or M4A for distribution.
I don't have the patience for that. I just hire it out.
I'm like Tom. I'm a control freak. I want control over every aspect.
What about we sort of touched on this with AI, but other ways to perhaps enhance your content with AI, like I understand like Riverside and some of these sources, online platforms have they have tools that will automatically cut a social reel for you, that type of thing. Is that something you've had any experience with, or you're laughing, Tom?
I'm laughing. My wife Heather is in the back there, and we have our podcast that we do weekly, and we were like, what if there's this thing we could just put an episode in and it's going to create social media caption things? And so we did it, and the results were not great.
Okay,
and
we got to see this.
What we learned was currently, at least this one application, I don't remember what it was, but what it did was it kind of overwhelmed you with quantity versus quality. It was like, you can put this episode in here, you're going to get 50 clips in a couple minutes. And it's like, oh my God, I have 0 clips right now. That's amazing. And then you go through and it's like, it picks the most random things and it tries to cut and it tried to like split. It was a mess. And then we found one that was like, this is pretty good. And she ended up spending, I don't know, like an hour, 40 minutes trying to like edit this thing. It's like, well, this would have been better if we just did it from scratch ourselves. I'm sure that there are some out there that maybe can focus more on the quality over quantity, but it's easy with a tool like that to get overwhelmed with like, I have 50 clips now, post them all, but they're probably not going to do you a ton of good if they're the ones we saw. And so again, being conscious of what you're creating is kind of important.
Great advice.
One thing you can do live, once you're used to your format and kind of doing your content, you can start to just jot notes about moments that are pick-upable for that repurposing process. So if you say something just super hilarious, or something goes wrong or whatever, you can mark that kind of time code. You don't have to get it exactly right, but that way you know where it is and kind of those moments are stuck, and it makes repurposing a whole lot easier.
Well, that's cool. In terms of exporting, Bandrew, you kind of touched a little bit on this, like with the idea of exporting your audio out of your digital audio workstation to bring into your NLE for editing. But in terms of just the differences between exporting and deliverables for audio-only formats and video formats, do you have any recommendations? When you export your podcast for audio, do you export an MP3 version as well as a WAV version? What sort of sample rate, bit rate kind of thing are you using there?
Yeah, so as far as audio only, I want to make a couple points here. First thing I want to say is produce for the playback location of your audience. What I mean is understand where your audience is going to be listening to. And the reason this clicked for me is I had somebody ask a question and they made a podcast for farmers. They listened to podcasts while working on farm machinery. So it's incredibly loud. And if I were sitting in a studio listening to his show, I would say this is unlistenable because it was so overly compressed. But he was producing specifically for the playback location of his audience. So that's something to always consider. As far as the exporting of the audio, there's loudness to consider. You don't want your audience having to ride the volume dial as they go from show to show. So for stereo exports, you want to export, this isn't standardized, it's just a best practices. For stereo, you want to export around -16 LUFS, LUFS. And for mono, you want to export around -19 LUFS. And most DAWs will have a loudness meter that you can look at and try to get pretty close to that. As far as the actual file formats, I used to use M4A because the quality is better than MP3, but I encountered an issue where M4A does not like ID3 tags. ID3 tags are the metadata in the file that say, this is the podcast name, the title, here's the artwork, here's all this information. So if you want to embed that information onto the audio file, I had to go back to MP3 and I export at stereo 192 kilobits per second. But when I was using M4A, I was at 128 and I was getting similar quality. So MP3 is slightly lower quality, but it gives you that additional functionality.
Well, that's great. Tom, do you have any video recommendations for exporting?
I use Final Cut Pro, so I end up exporting everything in a .mov file, and I just go into settings, export, video and audio, and then use the H.264 codec. And what that will do, especially with something like a video podcast, especially if it's a 4K video podcast, the native file might be like 50 gigabytes or something insane, and that will take it down to maybe like 6 or 7. And it's still going to have full quality, and it's still going to sound great and look great and not take a ton of time to upload. And then I did want to add something that took me a long time to learn when it came to editing audio, and maybe if I'm wrong, correct me, please. The importance of just a little bit of EQ and compression, or I guess compression is a type of EQ. For a long time, I was like, if your mic sounds good, you're done. And I didn't realize, Bandrew mentioned compression for the tractors. And what compression does, believe it or not, is it compresses the waveform. If you have, like I'm talking right now, I can speak really high, and there's going to be a high thing, and if I go really low or quiet, it's going to get quiet. And there's this huge dynamic range in my audio. That can be hard to listen to because there's high things and low things, and in this case, it's talking about someone being in a tractor. Pretty much all the lows are going to get run over by the tractor. So you need to detract them from it. And what compression does is...
I see what you did there.
Yeah. You can add a little bit of...
That was a quality dad joke.
Honestly, I'm kind of proud. I shouldn't be that proud of it. If you add compression, what it does is it reduces the dynamic range between those highs and those lows. And so it will make your audio sound a little more like, harsh isn't the right word, but it's not going to sound kind of as deep and boomy. It's going to sound compressed, which you will make, yeah. And that is going to actually make it easier to listen to, because it's going to make it less likely that someone have to turn the volume up or down constantly while they're listening. And in the case of someone in a car, on a tractor, whatever, they're not going to be competing with the lows or anything. So adding a little bit of compression to your audio file before you do it is important. I'm not very scientific about it. I have a very scientific method of turning dials until I like how it sounds. And that's my method.
If it sounds good, it is good.
Because there's so many different...
Exactly.
Your voice, your environment, your equipment are all variables that change it. So, and your preferences and your audience. So it's like, if it works for you, and then you put it out and see, did anyone say how bad that sounds? No? Okay. Did they say how good it sounds? Keep doing that. And those are kind of good guidelines.
Great. Well, we're going to move on to publishing now. We sort of touched on that when we were talking about video and migrating audio podcasts to YouTube, and then also you were talking about like RSS feeds and being able to push new episodes that way. But in terms of a broader distribution plan, so that's got YouTube covered. If there's a broader distribution plan, what are some considerations people can take in? What are some things people can take into consideration to come up with a broader distribution plan?
I think it's so when it comes to audio podcasting platforms, it's kind of okay to just blast it everywhere, in my opinion. I would love if y'all disagree with me. But because those platforms don't come with a social aspect of it, it's okay to just blast it. When you think about platforms like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, if you want to, or anybody doing TikTok podcasts? I don't know. But like when you think about video platforms that have comments and engagement, you want to focus more because you need to be there in the community engaging. And so I think it's a like you have to think about distribution from that perspective. You can't be everywhere engaging with all of the people all over the places. So when you're thinking about those platforms, think about where does your audience most hang out and choose to focus on that. Then add over time once you've gotten a really strong audience and core community there.
That's great. Great advice. Thank you. Tom?
Bandrew, do you have anything to say to that?
I think that was just fantastic advice. One thing I would add is be realistic with the time constraints or the time commitment, because if you sign up for every single platform, maybe do that just to make sure nobody steals your brand and starts posting horrifying stuff. But make sure you don't sign up for every platform, promote it on your show, and then not post anywhere. So just make sure that you're actually active on the platforms that you're promoting. And as far as promotion, I just want to add this in. I would recommend creating your own URL for these platforms. So for example, just buy podcastage.com/Twitter or podcastage.com/socials and promote that, as opposed to saying, hey, go check out Twitter or X or Facebook. That way you're promoting your own space online, as opposed to some third-party billionaire company that doesn't want, or they want, but they don't need your promotion. They have the money. So promote your own space and have your social links there.
That's really good.
Something that I would recommend.
Bandrew's like a huge advocate at a lot of episodes of having your own space, your own website, your own resource. His is a great example of that also like I've learned a lot from, and that's a great point. Can't emphasize it enough.
Do you have any? Have you had any experience with various podcast hosting platforms?
Personally, I started with Anchor, which is now Spotify for podcasters, and then I moved to Buzzsprout about 4 years ago, and that's where I've been ever since. And the Spotify for podcasters, the cool thing about it is it's free, and so that's a great way to dive in, and it will put you to all the directories. It'll give you an RSS feed. They even support video, so you can. It's not YouTube, but you can like watch video podcasts on Spotify, which is kind of crazy. And they have some cool things like people can leave messages, people can submit stuff to your show, and I kind of recommend that's a good place to start because it's free. If you know it's something you're going to stick with for a long time. The thing about the free platform is you don't have a lot of customer service. They change, they get rid of features, like whatever. You have a paid platform where you're the customer and you can email someone on a Sunday night and get a response sometimes. Like the level of service and tech support, and a lot of times too, the people running them are like Buzzsprout, for example. The people behind the scenes are just podcasting nerds since the beginning, and it's been mostly the same team. Like that's kind of who I want hosting my show, But here's the really important thing, though. You can switch at any time. It's not like YouTube, where if you want to move to a new YouTube channel, you blow up your old channel, everything's gone. You can start on one platform, and at any point in time, I think it's a 504 redirect is what it's called, you can just put in a new link that will just move everything to your new host. And I did it myself. Your audience will never know. It will play with your analytics a little bit because you're going to start from zero on your new platform, so you have to do a little bit of math, which is not my best friend, and kind of make that work. But you can start for free, like with Spotify, and then if you decide you want to move to a paid platform, you can, or vice versa. You do paid, your budget changes, now you need to be free, you can.
Right, well, that's great. Luria, do you have any hosting platforms that you recommend, or?
I think Tom covered it really, really well. I would say, you have a lot of options out there. Again, I'm always going to point you to what features do you need. Mm-hmm. Choose the right platform for those features. So if something on the free Spotify side of it, and you're like, no, I can't deal with them taking away features, I need this specific thing for all time, then, paying is going to be worth it.
If I can chime in here, there are going to be different needs for every single podcaster, and every single podcast host is vastly different. You got Libsyn, Blueberry, Buzzsprout, Podbean, Spot, goes on and on. So I actually want to make a recommendation for Better Podcasting Season 4. This entire season, each episode, they review a different podcast host. They go through all the features that are available, who it may work for, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the huge flaws with them. So if you don't have your podcast host yet, I would highly recommend listening to that season of the show Better Podcasting to get a really in-depth review, an impartial review where it's not somebody who works at the podcast hosts doing it, of each of these options that are available. Wow. Because each of them has vastly different features, and one may work for you while it may not work for somebody else.
That's a great recommendation. One thing that I'm hearing kind of as a constant point that's been it's been kind of coming up today through the whole conversation is the idea of your audience and being like on a platform where your audience is, or this audience engagement. How important is that to growing your audience?
Absolutely vital. Like, audience is everything.
Right.
If you're not building a relationship and a community with the people who are listening, then you're doing it to hear yourself talk. And hey, if that's the reason that you're doing it, then go for it. But you're not going to build a sustainable platform of any kind if you're not paying attention to connecting. Like, Sammy is here, Stuart is here. They've been in my community for years. Like, I value that so much, and it creates longevity, loyalty, when you actually get to know their names and something about them and connecting with them from that perspective. So you have to do that if you want any form of longevity or growth, really, because otherwise you're just going to wind up with a handful of people who listen and cool, be done with it.
Do you guys have anything to add, Tom or Bandrew?
I can go in sort of a similar direction. I hope this makes sense. I learned today that B&H sells tape recorders, like the one that's like a box, so it has like a speaker and the tape.
Where are you shopping?
It's a little shopping, and you can press record. I had one when I was like in kindergarten, and I used to press record and like do radio shows, which I guess were my first podcast. Little did I know. If you just want to hear yourself talk, just do that. You're good. Like, it doesn't need to go beyond the tape.
We're going to run upstairs.
Yeah. If you want to share something with an audience, I think there should be a reason. And I know something that I think all of us have talked about prior to today, just in our thing, is, your intrinsic motivation for doing something. And your audience, I think people can feel when they're kind of being used as, like, you're here to grow, to help me grow. Like, you're here because I need more money, I need more affiliate revenue, I need the sponsorship thing, I need my ego, whatever. People don't really like that, I have found. I don't like that. And the thing about YouTube, I guess this is kind of where it goes. Like, I started my channel, I started a podcast with zero idea of, like, any kind of... I'm the worst person to ask about strategy. I don't know. I make it up every single day and have no idea what I'm doing, and I've probably left most of the money on the table because I'm not great at making those kinds of decisions. But I also have, like, the best job in the world now, and the thing that YouTube did for me was when I was that little kid making those tape recordings, I was doing that because I didn't really feel like I kind of fit in anywhere. I was in, like, this small town, nobody else in 1994 was, like, into doing what I was doing. And I just kind of felt weird, and I felt isolated and outcast. And then I started this YouTube channel where I could make a video about whatever, and people would leave a comment and go like, "Oh, this is awesome, thanks." Or they would like a dumb joke, or a really intelligent, clever joke, whatever it might be. And then I started a podcast with the same thing of, like, I just want to share some thoughts. And then people are like, I listen to this every Monday morning, and it's like, oh, it became a part. And that, to me, that is like the perfect situation where you're creating something because you want to. For me, it, like, literally made me feel like I actually fit in the world, and it just turns out the people that I fit in with weren't around me physically, they were all around the world. And now there was this thing called the internet that let me actually find them and connect, and some of them are here, like, right now, which is amazing. And that takes a lot of time to build that community, and for those people to... It's a stronger community because people are coming into it, not because they're being funneled through, like, a sales funnel into a web page and now they're a hot lead or whatever it might be. It's like you have connected with something, and in an ideal world, which doesn't happen all the time, if you put the effort into creating it, you can then see some, I don't know what it would be called, returns? I don't know these business terms, returns on the investment. Because, people like what you do, so then, okay, maybe then you have chances to earn some revenue or turn it into a job or whatever. But if you go into it like, I'm going to get rich off podcasting, like, just don't. Just go buy the tape recorder. It's, like, super cheap, and you'll have a lot of fun. And that, I think being aware of your audience, not using your audience is very important.
Since we're talking about return on investments and all businessy stuff, just to offer a little bit of perspective, with a smaller audience, if you focus on community and people, with a smaller audience, you can make more than just having, millions of subscribers. Back in the day again. Oh God, I'm sounding so old. I had built up 2 million audience members, and then did a bad pivot and lost them all. I had to rebuild that from scratch over years, and I focused on not the subscriber numbers. And now I have fewer subscribers on YouTube than these guys, but I make enough to have a team and a sustainable business, right? So because I focus on the people. I just want to offer some perspective. It's not all about numbers out there.
That's a great point.
Well, that's great. That's great. We're just going to move towards our closing here, but we do have a Q&A that some curated questions that have been submitted via registrants during the registration process. And just for those of you that are watching the live stream, the gift card raffle is going to be taking place in the background during the Q&A here. So we're going to be giving away 5 B&H gift cards valued between $50 and $250. So keep an eye on the chat for that in case you're a lucky winner. So first question that I'm going to throw out here is from Ryan B. And he is asking, how do you approach structure and scripting your podcast? What tools do you use for research? Now, we've sort of answered some of the structure and scripting part, but let's talk about the research part. What tools do you use for research?
What I use for research is very old school, and it was the catalyst for podcasting. I use RSS readers. and I just capture a bunch of tech news and I look through it each week, see what's going to impact content creators and go from there. I also use feedback from the audience. I look into comment sections. I see what they're saying, what questions they're asking, what they push back on. Getting contradictory opinions from people is really helpful. And then because I do mainly audio focus, I end up just grabbing the gear and running tests and comparisons to help people. So that's the kind of research I do. I pull everything into a single source, an RSS reader, go through it. I'll check YouTube, I'll check social media sites for news releases, and get feedback from the audience.
I just have ChatGPT right over here. I mean, I think a big thing that I try to do is like having a background as a teacher. If I'm trying to do any kind of research, which, like, let's be honest, the stuff I do, my podcast don't require a ton of it. It's like, how do I feel about it? But if I need to do research, try to go to a direct source, a reliable source. Usually it's a manufacturer. A lot of times too, especially through social media, if someone's saying, like, say you want to do a podcast about a product, and someone says, this product, this camera sucks, it overheats. No, this camera never overheats. Okay, I'm just going to email the manufacturer and say, like, hey, what's the temperature rating on this camera? And, like, I know it's listed on one line in the book, but maybe you'll give me more info, and then you can get, like, a source. You can be a journalist and get the source straight from the source. That makes sense. The info straight from the source. The scoop, as they say.
I run everything through a 3-question system. One, what do they want to know? What does the audience want to know about this topic? What do they need to know? And most importantly, what do they not need to know? Because we as content creators, we tend to pack too much information in, and it overwhelms them, and it lessens the effectiveness of that value that you're promising to give. And so when you ask those 3 questions, you can filter out information and filter in appropriately.
Wow, that's great. Our next question is from Jesse T. Were you ever in a position where you felt stuck creatively, and how did you get out?
Never. Okay, so getting out of your own way, back to that. There's a difference between motivation and discipline. So there are 2 parts to this that I like to think about. Is when you're feeling not creative and you're like, I gotta do this thing. 1, you don't need motivation to create content. You do not need motivation. It is only about the discipline of action. And that will get you further and faster than anything else. But the second part is a reality check of, are you out of alignment? So, like, if you've been doing this for a while, or maybe you're just starting and you're not sure where you're supposed to be, you need to understand whether it's a discipline, motivation thing, or if it's an out of an alignment thing, because maybe your passions have changed, maybe your needs have changed financially or content-wise, making a difference in the world. Like, all of that stuff can change, and it should change over time. So you need to identify whether it's motivation or out of alignment and fix the out of alignment. And that always brings us back to the reason that the audience matters so vitally, is that when you do feel out of alignment and you make changes and pivots and move forward in a slightly different direction or a majorly different direction, I've done it all, and then your audience sticks with you, right? Because they're going to go through that change with you.
Something that I have found helps me a lot is taking a break and stepping back for a little bit. I've been on YouTube for almost 20 years, with the current channel 10 years, and I had this extremely strict, unnecessary burden. I am never going to miss a week. And that leads to you burning out, getting very unpassionate, and as it has been alluded, your audience, the people watching you, are incredibly perceptive and smart. They pick up on it and say, what is wrong with you? Why are you so sad? So taking a step back, you may not want to break that upload streak, but your audience is incredibly understanding. They want you to be well. They want you to enjoy making the show that they enjoy. So don't be afraid to take a step back and say, I need a week off. I need 2 weeks off. Yeah. During that time, maybe go consume other types of media other than podcasting or YouTube videos. Go to a museum, go to a live concert, watch some movies. All of these different media formats can spark that creativity in you and make you think of a new approach to creating a podcast or a video or anything. So take a step back, let your audience know, hey, I'm taking a week off, 2 weeks off just to recharge. They will understand. They will be there when you get back. And that is what has helped me tremendously to keep doing it for too long. I've been doing this for too long.
That is gold, honestly. Like, burnout is a real thing. I think probably all of us have hit that at some point. And you will. And that is just gold. I want to just reiterate that. Also know that there is no actual data to prove that when you take a step back, it harms your channel. That is a self-imposed infliction on our own selves that is just not even true data specific wise. That's not a good phrase. You know, words.
We stuck with you because we're on it, so we know what you. Those are the two best answers I've ever heard to that question. So the thing I will just tag on to the end there is that your body, you feel ways for reasons, right? Like it might just be, I don't feel creative today. But if it's week 6, like something is wrong. And I mentioned earlier, like podcasts go to 7 episodes, or if you get to, episode 7 and it's just your ego that's like, I gotta keep going because I can't be a statistic, maybe it's okay. Maybe you're done. Maybe you have a 400 episode idea or a 10-year idea that you needed to get through this 7 episode idea to get to that. And you kind of have to stop trying to force a round peg into a square hole, choke an idea to life at a certain point, and just go I think this has run its course. Let's see what's next, or take a break or reevaluate.
Awesome. Great advice. Mike B is asking, what would you do differently if you started a podcast today versus whenever you started yours in the past? Bandrew, what you got for us?
I don't think I would do much differently. Because right at the start, I was doing video, I was uploading to YouTube. The reason I made that decision, most people have YouTube accounts. It is the second biggest search engine, only to Google. So I wanted a way that was easy for people to communicate with me and for me to engage with them. So I was already uploading to YouTube. I was already using pretty decent gear. The one thing that I would change, this is very specific to me, is using 2 identical cameras because I'm colorblind, and color matching 2 different cameras with 2 different color sciences and everything was just a nightmare. And those early podcast episodes look like trash.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably would embrace video more. Audio is something that made my podcast sustainable because, again, I don't have to set up lights. I don't have to set up any. I can just go in my. There are so many podcasts where I'm in my pajamas, and my hair is messy and everything's crazy, and it's just I'm doing a podcast today. Can't do that as easily with video. In theory, you could, but I would. And so I would probably embrace video a little bit more, especially with the tools that didn't exist, like Luria mentioned, where it's you build this kind of set and forget, one and done streaming setup that is now your podcast setup, and now it's more work. It's 3 or 4 times more work to incorporate video, but the payoff is also there, and the audience expectation is also kind of there, and that's something to be aware of, is people are sort of hey, where's your video podcast? I'm sorry, it's audio only. It's hard sometimes.
And I would stop doing what everybody else told me to do. So don't listen to us. No, I'm just joking. No, I think that when we're starting out in the content creation world, there's so much advice and there's so many different paths to success. And I spent way too long letting everybody else tell me what I should do versus really getting clear on what I wanted. And I think that that's where I finally am after 18 years of really looking internally and understanding who I am, what my strengths are, and how that matches with the content that I'm trying to produce and the people that I'm trying to help. So I think that's key for me.
Awesome.
Can I tag one more thing on there?
Please.
on top of that, I would say just do it. If you have this desire, just get to it. But one thing I actually would change, this just popped into my mind, understand this is public. Understand this is available. So be careful what you say. Don't share too much personal information. And the way that I came to think about it is, if I wouldn't be okay with my boss listening to this, I'm not going to say it. So absolutely, just start the podcast. Don't get too in your head about it. But understand this is available to anybody in the world, and it is permanent. So be careful with the information that you do share.
Ding, ding.
Reality check right there. Bandrew keeping it real for us. Nice. Paul J. is saying he's curious about the best way to initiate a social media buzz to drive traffic or reach and build an audience. Do you have any thought on that, using social media to build your podcast audience?
Look at what I do and do the opposite. And then you're going to do great.
I think the best advice I've ever heard comes from a YouTube employee, which is give them a reason to want to watch, to want to listen. They're not going to click on that link from social to just because you want them to, just because they're seeing it in their feed. You have to create the reason why they benefit from it, and you have to showcase that. So it's not just about saying, hey, new podcast out, go listen. That's not going to get you anywhere ever. So what is the reason behind it? It's not necessarily even the topic of the show. What benefit do they get? Features versus benefits, I guess you could really think about it, right?
Exactly. I don't think there's any special formula for buzz. I think it really comes down to exactly what Luria is talking about, where you just make the most valuable piece of content that you're able to. Make sure you're respecting the audience's time. Make sure they are actually getting something out of it. And instead of just saying, hey, new podcast episode, I'd love if you watch this, go ahead and subscribe. It would help me out so much. Instead of framing it that way, what are they going to get out of it? Here are 5 tips on how to get better sounding guitar recordings. Maybe that. Hey, subscribe and I will teach you how to do this. Give them the reason why. Because I really like it if you did this. That's not reason. That's reason for you, but not for them.
And also, creating buzz is about creating anticipation. The emotional pull of anticipation of what they're missing, FOMO. So you can do things like, oh my God, this thing happened. Like for me in live streaming, like the example I always use is I fell off my chair. Or something crazy that happened, go watch it, because you're missing out on that humorous thing. So creating FOMO, creating anticipation to something that's going to come even, so you can, one of the things I do is take a photo while I'm creating something and tell them it's coming, not everything about it, but also like create that like, oh, I need to see that when it comes out.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the whole thing with your audience. They're not going to want to like share a commercial, right? Like
no.
They don't want to share your ad, but they want to click on or share something that's fun and interesting. And a way to do that is to be genuine, authentic. And here's the thing: why if you're recording the whole time and you fall out of your chair or a mic breaks, I cut my head open during a live stream once and felt like we had to end it because it got a little rough there. But like, what's one of the most memorable things that ever happened is that. And those are the kinds of things, those are human moments, those are real things that people will click on. When I was a teacher and my students would create stuff, we would do like mini documentaries or podcasts or whatever. The thing I would always ask the students is like, what do you want the audience to think, feel, know, or do after, watching this or listening to it? I think that's important. What do you want someone to think, feel, know, or do? Because that's a tangible. It's very intangible. It's something that they're going to get from it. It's not just like, well, I boosted your views for the day or whatever.
Right.
Oh, and also one more thing, post things outside of your content, the human element of it. Pictures of your food, pictures of your dogs or cats or kids, if you want them on social. Like, post about you as a human being and connect on that level. And they're going to be 100 more times interested in the content when you do post it. People get really like upset. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but people get upset when their pictures of the food, the steak they ate that night, gets more comments and more engagement than their content promotion posts. But that's just human. That's just natural, and you should celebrate that imbalance as you see it, and instead understand that is what it's what's going to cause people to want to listen to your content.
I think that's an important thing to consider too, because when you create stuff online, whatever it is, it's very easy to take the humanity out of it because the viewer, they're scrolling through a feed, there's just person, show, and you forget it's a person that put their experience, time, effort into it. That's why you would get a comment that's just this is terrible, you suck, this is whatever. Not that I would ever get a comment like that. It definitely didn't happen this morning.
Oh no.
And those
right at dawn.
if I think it's from Podcastage, I don't. If you
wasn't me.
If you do those human elements, it's a little harder to do that to someone when they feel like a person.
Yeah.
When somebody just feels like this show, this concept, this is just a person who reviews microphones, a person who has a podcast about this thing, and it's oh, that's the person that has a cute dog that they love and play with. It helps make you more human, helps you connect with the audience, helps people connect with you, and also maybe makes the world a bit of a friendlier place for you online as well.
Wow, that's great. We have 2 questions left, but before we do, I just want to inform our studio audience or in-store audience that we're going to be passing out some Post-it notes. So if you can write your name on those Post-it notes, they'll be collected. That's going to be your raffle ticket,
Nice.
which we'll be running the raffle at the end of the live stream here. So Wallace M is asking, is it worth investing time and work into making a video podcast? Well, we've kind of talked a little bit about that, but in the age, the second part of his question is probably what we're going to get to. It is in this age where video podcasting is so popular, is it possible to succeed with only voice nowadays?
Yeah.
I think you can succeed as voice only. It is a bit more difficult because, as Tom alluded to, there's this expectation that every podcast has video now. Every podcast has a live stream. So it's going to be a bit more difficult, especially since you're kind of not necessarily ignoring, but bypassing such a valuable way to grow a show, and that is through algorithms. It is going to be more difficult because one of the biggest critiques I have heard from podcasters is audio-only podcasting has no discoverability. The only way to find shows within audio-only podcasting, up until I think very recently, there have been a few companies that have attempted to resolve this, is through searching on iTunes, searching on Spotify. That's why the name of your show don't follow what I did, but the name of your show should have something to do with the topics covered, because that's the only real way that a show gets discovered organically, I suppose, or maybe not organically, is through search. The other way is through word of mouth. Yeah. So it's a lot more difficult because you are bypassing all of that algorithmic discoverability on YouTube, not on Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, X, all of those places.
Oh, go ahead, Luria.
I was just going to tack on to that. There are faceless YouTube channels that do really, really well and make a whole lot of money, but they don't have that connection. So identify whether that human connection is important to you, and then understand that text, blog posts are the basic, right? Is kind of the foundational principle between communication. You add audio on that, and that's more connection, because now you can hear the voice and you can connect on a deeper level. You go to video, and guess what? You have deepened that connection even more, because now you have all of the facial elements, the eyes, which are the entry to the soul, or what's the phrase?
Windows to the soul.
Okay, that. And then you go live, right? And maybe you do your podcast live even, but then that's even more connection. So you have these layers of connection that you can think about. And so you need to understand, is that human element something that you want for that longevity, or do you want to build a faceless, a podcasting audio only is not faceless YouTube channel, but it's just to put it in perspective.
Yeah, my second most favorite podcast after the Bandrew Says podcast is Talking Simpsons, which is a chronological look through The Simpsons. And it's an audio-only podcast that's been around for 10 years, and it's the host's full-time job. And it's audio-only, no video, even though people ask for it. They just have decided no, because that's what makes it sustainable. And to me, that was a good lesson, especially for someone who might be trying to fit a podcast into their schedule. If you feel like you have to do video or you can't do it, but you could swing audio, don't let that be the thing that stops you from going. And even though the discoverability is more difficult because it is active search, someone's looking for podcast about your topic, or it's word of mouth. It's, have you heard blank podcast? How many of our friends have recommended podcasts to us that we might not ever listen to because for some reason it feels like homework. But if you do listen to it, it becomes one of your favorites. That audience, that smaller audience, kind of like you were saying earlier, Luria, is they are with you. There might not be a lot of them, but those people who actively seek you out, who tune in or, I don't know, listen in every week or whatever, they're in it. And that's hugely valuable, and that can absolutely still happen today with audio only, for sure.
Okay, great. Well, of course I have saved the, I don't know whether it's the best or the most loaded or the spiciest question for last. It's from Lee B. It is, how do you monetize a podcast?
Wait, you can monetize podcasts?
I'll jump in here first. The first thing I want to say, I just want to make it abundantly clear, it is perfectly fine to do podcasting as a hobby. You do not need to monetize it.
Hey.
There are people who golf. They make $0 because they love it. You can be the golfer of podcasting. But as far as monetization, there are tons of ways. You could do ads. You could put old episodes behind a paywall, merchandise. You could do live shows if you get a big enough audience. And the way that I recently switched to is a method called value for value. And this is a method I stole from Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak. And what that means is you don't put anything behind a paywall. You don't put any ads. You just produce the best show you can. And if anybody gets value out of the show, they just return that in a monetary way, in a time way, in whatever way they can. They return that value to you. Sometimes that is monetary. Sometimes they help you with ideas for future episodes. They may help with ideas for thumbnails, for clips, for anything. So that's my favorite method, because people can enjoy your show without the sometimes extremely excruciatingly painful ads, and you get the value that you give. And I absolutely love that method. That's my favorite.
Yeah, I love that too. I think it's very important to pay attention to what you're doing. So I talk a lot about equipment personally. So even my podcast, when it's not necessarily a gear-focused episode, I'm going to talk about gear. I'm going to talk about the microphone I'm using, the mixer I'm using to record into. It makes sense, not just from a salesy point of view to put an affiliate link to that gear, but people actually want to know, wait, what is the mic you're using? And they just want a link to click that they can go to. So yeah, I'm going to put an affiliate link because they need the link anyway. And that makes a lot of sense. And that's incredibly helpful. Stuff it's helpful to me, helpful to them. And so I've actually done fairly well over the years with affiliate revenue. And I've had people try to just copy and paste what I do, but they have a mental health podcast. It does not translate. That person is not looking for the microphone you're using. They do not care what microphone you're using at all. You have to work with your audience, but what they might care about is maybe supporting you through a Patreon, a channel membership, a buy me a coffee link or whatever it might be. And sometimes I found too, just letting people know, it's weird. I don't like asking for support. So again, money left on the table, but letting people know that they could support you. Hey, I have this thing here. There's a link here, a Patreon here, whatever, it could help. Sometimes people are really happy to, they want to support you. I'm Patreon on people, I don't even know what the benefits are. I just want them to keep making the thing they're making. And so I want to support them.
I agree with everything y'all said. And if you want to scale, if you want to not leave money on the table, and if you want to grow kind of more of a business out of the content that you're creating, then you do have to look at it maybe a little differently. You can merge these different concepts together, but you have to have a little bit more of a strategy behind it, monetization-wise. And so I look at on-platform monetization and off-platform monetization. Those are the two buckets. On-platform is sponsorships. It's anything that you do where, it's sponsorships, ads, Patreon, that kind of thing, like community support. Unfortunately, the bad side of that is that you have to keep creating content for that revenue to keep coming in. And so then you start looking at off-platform monetization options, which is courses or consulting or product-based stuff. And that allows you to have a little bit more of a sustainable evergreen system that you can use your content to draw people into those off-platform things. And that will sustain you even if you're not creating content if you do it well. So I think that a merging of all of those things is really the right way to go, because you can't just do it to make money, like you were saying before. And the value for value is beautiful, and it may not scale unless you get a huge millions of audiences if you want to hire out, editing and hire out other things. So you also need to understand kind of where you're going with this from a structure perspective in the future.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. That's pretty much bringing us to the end of our time today. I want to thank the live stream audience for joining us. I also want to thank the in-store audience for joining us. Thank you for hanging in there. We've covered a lot of ground and a lot of topics. And of course, I want to thank our panel of esteemed creators, Luria Petrucci, Tom Buck, and Bandrew Scott. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and wisdom today. It was our pleasure to have you. Thank you. So, for those of you in the audience here, stick around. We got some refreshments and food, and we're going to be running this raffle. But other than that, thank you again for joining us on our Podcasting 101 Creator Roundtable event. Again, it's the first in this series of Creator Roundtable events. We're going to be doing more about photography, videography, different audio questions. We'll have experts for you to help you in your creative journey. I'm Andrew with B&H, and you want to say something?
I did not mean to just derail the whole thing. I'm not going to get this chance
again.
It's the
teacher in me, so
Sorry,
so the hand go up.
The student in me. The first time I came to New York City was July of 2009, exactly 15 years ago, and I stood on the corner over there because B&H was like half the reason I came. I took a photo of B&H because I was like, it's so cool. I can't believe I get to go to B&H, and I went through the store and bought something. To have started creating something with no goal in mind and to be able to connect with people and share it and be like in the room, that is unreal. So I just, one, hope you know how grateful I am, and two, how powerful it is when you create something and put it out there. It is unreal. So thank you. This is super surreal, and I just want to, I wish I could go tell that kid that.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you. And hopefully we'll have some more moments like that in our future Creator Roundtable events. And keep watching bnh.com and bhphoto.com for upcoming events. This is Andrew with B&H, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That was beautiful.
I'm not going to get a chance to tell a story again in this scenario.
Totally.
Cool. Do we get to announce raffles?
Do we get to announce?